From the studios of Foxboro Cable Access, located in the center of Foxboro, Massachusetts, you are watching Around Foxboro.
Welcome to another episode of Around Foxboro. My name is Julie Love. I'm your host. Today we have a wonderful guest. So we have local author Elizabeth Bristol with us. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Jerry. Nice to meet you.
Good to see you. So you are here with us with your book.
Yeah.
Marry Me.
My new baby.
Yes, absolutely. So you are a Foxboro resident?
Yeah, I grew up here and went through the school district and graduated in 1981, a while ago. Yeah.
Wonderful. So when did this book, Marry Me, come out?
This one's new. It came out in June, so just not even 2 months.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So can you please tell us more about who you are, your biography?
Yeah, sure. After I grew up here, I kind of couldn't wait to throw on a backpack and just go see the world. That was kind of, a lot of people were doing that at the time. And so when I left here, that's what I did. And it was, I always thought I had a reason for living. Like, I sort of think we all have a purpose. So I wanted to find out what that was. So I went overseas and went through, backpacking through Europe, and then I ended up on an overland trip in Africa. And that's where I start my story here. The first third of the book is about Africa. And then I also worked on a boat in the Caribbean. So it's about the Caribbean. And then I lived in Alaska for 8 years. And so it's a physical journey, and it's a spiritual journey, and an emotional journey, kind of a coming of age, how I navigated from being this wild party girl to someone who their spirituality was important to them, because that was not how I set out. I really didn't expect that to be a part of it, but it's been quite a journey.
Wow. So you grew up in Foxboro but decided to just put a backpack on and then travel the world?
Yeah, yes.
And what age did you start traveling?
Let's see. I left here right when I was 17, and I went to college. And I went to college in Louisiana and Texas and London. And when I was 26, like I said, I'd heard about, my roommates in London kept talking about Africa, and I really wanted to go. So I came back here and I worked about 8 jobs and got the money for this overland trip and headed to Africa. So we left from London, and we're going all the way down through Europe and the Middle East to, I was supposed to be to Zimbabwe, but something happened and I had to come home early. So it was really, it was amazing. The overland trip, we would camp, and so we had a tent mate in the tent, and then we also had cook groups. So like 3 of us would go into the markets in Africa and go and look for the food that we could make into, we'd pick up chickens and have to feel them and find the one with the most meat on it and have it killed for our dinner. And so it was wild. We hiked up to volcanoes and looked down into the lava. We went into the jungle and we saw silverback gorillas and camped with pygmies, and so it was pretty crazy. It was a cool. I would recommend it to anyone who likes those kind of adventures, though.
Wow.
Very fun.
So throughout the travel that you were taking a journal, or?
Yes, I've always journaled, thank God because you write too, right? And so thank you that I just took notes all the time, because I always knew I was going to be a writer, but I just didn't know what my story was. And so because I journaled, it's really good to be able to look back and see the details, right, from some of these stories.
So tell us about your book.
Yeah, so let's see. So it starts in Africa, and what was happening was after all those wild experiences during the day, I would go and sit by my tent at nighttime. It was a lot to process, it was all kinds of really realizing my white privilege, going through all these experiences. I love to meet the local people, like when we camped in campgrounds locally. So I'd sit out in front of my tent, and I would never have called it prayer. But I would wonder at night, and try to put all these pieces together. And in Africa, they have these beautiful lightning shows, and you hear these funny noises, and you don't know that loud screeching noise is really only a little squirrel called a hyrax. It could be something scarier, right? So I would sit out at night and I'd look at the stars, and I just started to, I always knew God was there. I grew up going to Bethany Church across the Common, but I really didn't want any part of him. But in that faraway place, I liked a little familiarity. And as I tried to process things, and I was looking for my destiny, really, right? My reason for living. And so who would know that? But, God. So I'd kind of sit out in front of my tent, and I would just wonder about what happened during the day. And I call him Fred because, it was a little less overwhelming, a little more personal. And I just kind of wonder about these things that were happening. And so that's kind of how the journey started here too. It's, again, I just wasn't interested in God. I thought, life would be boring and I'd have no cool friends. But I found out he was way cooler than I thought. And as I asked him about my destiny, I feel like he showed me it. And so it was really quite a journey going to all these different places and finding it with him.
So in your book, do you go from Africa to somewhere else, or just Africa?
Yeah, so Africa is the first third, and that's about these experiences. And then I came home because I broke my back. And I came home, but I didn't want to get stuck again. I thought, again, I don't know, I set out again. So I ended up taking a job in the Caribbean, working on a charter boat. And when I almost died, the boat was filled with water, and it was a scary situation. That's kind of when I really cried out, okay, if you're real, I need you. And turns out he was real, so started a relationship in that way. And I ended up bouncing back to Foxborough again. But I always wanted to go to Alaska. So that's the third part of the book. I had pen pals in Alaska when I was little. And so I drove up to Alaska, and I lived there for 8 years. So that's the final third of more of the, yes, a physical journey, but also kind of coming into myself with God and emotional healing as well. Yeah.
So how did you come up with this title?
Oh, the title, yes, that one. Often they'll tell you, to do one that totally explains it, So I put the tagline of One Woman's Incredible Adventure with God. But I really liked being creative with the title. And so there's a story about these two sisters named Mary and Martha. And Mary's this crazy busy girl, always busy serving people. And her sister is always not, is just kind of hanging out with the people. And so I originally was Martha. I was working 84 hours and 12 jobs to always run off on all these adventures. And as I made God important in my life and began to hang out with him, I felt like he shifted me into a Mary. And so I would more sit outside my tent and listen and look for him. And at the same time, I like the double entendre it has, right, with marry me. Doesn't that remind you of will you marry me? And in the process of hanging out with God and getting to know him, I felt like he became my partner. And so that's also the story through the book of partnering with him to find my destiny. Yeah.
So when you were trying to write this book, and then when you felt compelled to publish it, what was the process like?
Yes, I finished it last year, and it took a little bit longer than I expected, right? I'm trying to think when I started it. It was maybe 7 years. And the reason it took a long time is because there was some stories in it I wasn't going to tell. And the stories that I started to tell about the harder stories from my background. I was wild when I left this town, right? So a lot of drugs and alcohol and boys. And so there were some stories about losing my virginity when I didn't want to, or I had an abortion when I was 17. And so the stories that took me a while, I went back to speak to some of the people. I went back to talk to the the man that I lost my virginity with. I went back and did a lot of healing in those kind of ways. And so it took a while to get there. And then when I finished it last year, I really didn't know how to reach the readers, right? That, you work all that much to put something into a book, and then how do you get it to people who'd be interested? So it was sitting on the shelf. And right before the pandemic came up, I just really felt a nudge like now. So in order to do something now, traditional publishing is in a strange place these days, especially with the pandemic. So I self-published it. And now just working on different ways to find people who would like to read it.
So self-published through what platform?
Amazon, KDP. Publishing, it's called. Yeah, I had a man who helped me make the formats, because I didn't really know how to do that. And then he put it up there for me. So that's where it sells.
So is this your first book?
It is, yeah.
And how's it going?
It's going well. And it's really pretty fun. I love the feedback. I know yours is about to come out. And what's so fun to me is to hear the feedback from different people I know and people I haven't known. And you know how, I don't know, books speak to people in different ways.
Right.
And so it's really sweet to hear the different ways it's speaking to people. Really loving that.
What are the feedbacks that you're getting from?
A lot of people like with also healing, because I think, when you tell your hard stories like that, you also put words to other people's similar hard stories. Something like a date rape or an abortion, people may not always write so clearly about. But there's so many people, like when I grew up here, it was kind of a form of birth control. And so it helps to put words to other people's stories who also need healing too. So that part has really been exciting. Again, I didn't set out to write those chapters, but yeah, I really appreciated that.
Do you feel okay, or did you feel compelled to write that section? And then do you feel
In fact,
good? Do you feel better now?
I do feel better. I had written those sections for myself, right? Because I knew I needed to explain them to myself. In the process of doing a memoir and kind of talking about all those different parts of my life, there were some other ones too. I worked at a church, and the pastor had a lot of relationships he shouldn't have been having. There was a man that I met at that church, and I thought we were going to be married, but now he's been married to a man for 7 years. So there were a lot of those tougher stories that kind of came to the surface as I was doing this. And like for the date rape, I wrote it up, and I wasn't going to put it in the book. I really put it aside. But again, I felt a nudge that it needed to be in there, and I really struggled with it. But as soon as I put it in there, the whole Me Too thing came out, and I thought, okay, there's lots of women who've been through similar things. And just like one of the women who was involved with the pastor, she writes a chapter with me because she had gone to him for counseling with her husband and then became involved with him. And so it was a tough story on several levels, but as I came to write this, I went to her and said, would you write this chapter with me? And she said, of course, because we know there's people out there we can help with our story. So, yeah.
Wow.
I know.
So when you see the feedback from people like that, do you reply, or do you like
of
reach
course,
out?
yeah.
Yes?
That's my favorite part,
Really?
I think. Yeah, like online I have a blog.
Oh, you do?
And so I really like that. I like helping other people find their destiny or seeking with God. Again, I had no interest in that. And then he turned out to be so much cooler than I thought. So it's fun online to interact with other people in that same way.
Sure. And so since it came out in June, and it's
Yeah.
only a few months,
Yeah.
do you think your life has changed a little bit?
My life has changed a lot, actually. Not totally because of this, but we're in the middle of the pandemic. I moved across country. I was living in Oregon, and my dad's on hospice, and so I packed up out there. I had a bunch of personal situations going on out there, a breast cancer scare and some other things. So then meanwhile, I'm trying to come across the country, and I was going to stay with one friend. She said, don't come, we just got COVID, don't come, so kind of dodging that to get back here, and and now caring for my dad, and also trying to continue to reach readers with this. So I've been taking a few classes on how to do that, and so it's been intriguing already.
So I have a friend who came on our show, Yosef Israel. He was telling me after he published his book, he felt like his book has its own life, and then it took off on its life.
Yes.
Do you feel that way?
You know what? I expected that. I did these things in the beginning, and I call them crafted prayers. And so each time I wrote some while I was writing it, I wrote some while I was publishing it, and I kind of expected that it will have its own life. Mm-hmm. So I do expect that it will, right? That it will go places that I can't go. And so I haven't quite seen a lot of that yet, but I'm hoping that for it.
So you sent us some video of your book trailer.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's watch it together.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you so much for sending that video.
Oh, thank you for showing it.
So do you have some marketing people, like marketing team helping you to promote your book?
Wouldn't that be great? Yourself? I do not. I have a marketing degree, and so I have some ideas, and my big giant marketing plan at the moment is to take the ideas that people tell me, because as I've studied publishing, I was working with an agent when I was out on the coast too. He is the number one Christian agent in the country. So he taught me a lot about different things. He doesn't represent memoirs, so he didn't represent the book. But so I have these ideas, but they're not really traditional. I've been sending some to different people who, either people that I loved their memoirs, and I'm grateful for them telling their tough stories. And so, it's sort of unique ways like that. But I would love any help in that direction.
So do you have a website or Facebook or Instagram about the book that people can learn more about it?
I do. I have a Facebook author page. I have Instagram, but most of it is my website is Elizabeth B as in boy, Bristol.com. And like I said, I blog, and there's a book page on there. So there's a copy of the book trailer we just watched. There's a segment of the book that you can read, a sample of it, and see. And the blogging, I have a spiritual adventure team. So we kind of have people bring their questions and their doubts, and we just wade through the God stuff together on that in different posts.
Wonderful. So what are your friends and family saying about your book?
I got a wide range in that way. Again, there's people that are very supportive of it, and there's a few people that, it's not, how when you share a memoir, again, I went to all the people that are in it, and we talked about it, and there are certain people that chose not to use their name, as you can imagine. But it was also really fun to be with them, for some of them, to dream, what name would you like to use instead of that? And so we did a fair amount of that. There's some cool connections and why they're renamed. just to protect their privacy in that way. So it's been a journey in that, and I expect if I live long enough, I've got quite a few more memoirs to write, and one of them will be about writing. Yeah, about the journey of doing it and what happens afterwards.
Sure. So right now you live in Foxborough, taking care of your father. You just published the book. Do you have any job besides that?
No, at the moment I'm still writing. So I'm taking some classes and blogging and starting on the next one.
So can you tell us what's the next one?
I think the next one's going to be Jerusalem. I lived in Jerusalem for a year, and then I worked in Jericho for a year after that, and also in Mozambique. I went back and forth between Jericho and Mozambique. They're working as a missionary, feeding and taking care of people. And Mozambique, it was mostly children. And so I think Jerusalem may be a book of its own, maybe mission work, maybe writing. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at next. I went back to Jerusalem last year and worked there for the summer and thought I might be headed that way, but with COVID and my dad, it's another surprise. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when publishing maybe the next book,
yeah,
do you go back to your journal or like just a memory?
Yeah, I wrote 900 single-space typewritten pages when I lived in Jerusalem. So this time I have a lot of details I could include. And of course a book, that's too long for a book, right? But yeah, so we'll see how that looks. It surprises us, I think. I didn't expect this one to come out like this, so I think it will surprise me there too.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you have any planned book tour or some just keep publishing?
Yeah.
Do you have
that was my thing before. I've driven across country 53 times.
Wow.
And I love that. I love stopping in and speaking. When I was working in Mozambique or Jericho, I would just go wherever anyone asked me to talk about what I was doing. And so that was fun. I really like that. But this time I was going to do that on the way back, and then with COVID and with my dad, it's looking a little bit different these days, so I'm not quite sure if there'll be more online opportunities like that or what that will look like.
Sure.
So in the meantime, just keep on writing. Yeah.
Nice. Wow. So is there anything you want to promote about your book, your target audience or people that maybe should read your book?
Yeah, I think there's they always ask you who's your person, and I see several people, right? I see the journey itself is one, but definitely for the seekers, definitely people who have wondered if they want some kind of adventure with God, because He is just way cooler than anyone ever told me before, and so that's who I would recommend it for. And also, too, for those healing pieces. There are certainly lots of us women that have been through abuse or different things, and I think those stories will speak to people in that place too, or the men too. Like when the topic of abortion has come up, it never occurred to me. I always thought of that as a woman's problem in a sense, but of course everyone involves a man. And so several times I'll be sitting across a couple and we'll be talking about it, and the man will start crying and he'll tell me that he too went through that. And so I've really appreciated those opportunities to kind of hear from them and their stories, and they need healing as well too.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming to Foxborough Cable Access today, and
Thank
then
you so
around
much.
Foxborough. And then I really hope that your book will reach out to people who need your writing.
Thank you, Terry.
Yes. So do you have any last word for people in Foxborough and beyond that are watching your show?
I do. I was thinking about that. I was watching some of your podcast and other things just to get an idea about this. And if I was going to look into the camera, could I look into the camera to speak to them? Look into that one. So I was thinking about this, and I do. I want to speak to everyone who's watching us today. And every single person who's out there, you are here for a reason. And I don't mean just listening to us, but I mean here. And as I've been thinking again about the destiny, God is way cooler than anybody ever told me. And in these crazy, crazy times with everything going on, He has a really cool plan for your life. And if you don't yet know what it is, I would encourage you to ask. And I'd encourage you to listen. And in my case, it started to be like a treasure hunt, where I started to get these little things that I used to would call coincidences. Now I don't, there's so many things happened, I don't believe in coincidence. And so in that, I would just encourage you to look for your destiny and don't give up until you find it. Because that, finding your destiny with God, I just can't even explain. I want to say it's like a fulfillment or a profound satisfaction, but it's just so much more than that. It is the coolest thing to spend your life on. So that's what I would say. And if you need some help, again, welcome to come to my website, elizabethbbristol.com, and bring your questions and your doubts, and join my spiritual adventure team, and we'll wade through the God stuff together. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the last word. Well, thank you everyone for watching Around Foxborough. My name is Julie Love. Our executive director is Michael Weber, and director is Paul Beck. If you have missed another episode of Around Foxborough, you can always go back to our website, fcatv.org, and click on Around Foxborough. Thank you again, and see you next time.